There is a stillness that comes at the end of the day, when the light grows soft and the world grows quiet. And it is in that stillness that we find ourselves tonight, settling gently into rest, letting the mind grow slow and the breath grow easy. Tonight, we travel to a very old place, a place of wide rivers and warm sand, a place where the air was thick with the scent of water and earth, and where the sky at evening turned the color of embers cooling in the dark. We are going to ancient Egypt. If you could stand there now, in that long ago time, you would feel the warmth of the land beneath your feet. The Nile would be nearby, always nearby in Egypt, its great wide body of water moving slowly southward, carrying silt and life and cool shadow along its banks. The river was everything in Egypt. It fed the fields. It gave the people water. It filled the air near its shores with a sound of flowing, a constant and gentle sound, like a long, unhurried breath. Egypt was an old land even then. Its cities had stood for hundreds of years. Its palaces were made of stone. Its people knew how to build things that reached toward the sky, and they built them with great care and with great labor. Along the banks of the Nile, there were cities and monuments and storehouses, and the roads between them were worn smooth from long use, from countless feet walking slowly in the heat of the day. It was a land of order, of ranks and roles, with Pharaoh at the top of everything, and everyone else arranged beneath him like rows of bricks in one of Egypt's great walls. Pharaoh's word was law. Pharaoh's commands moved through the land like water through a channel, steady, quiet, and impossible to stop. And it was into this land, this warm, ancient, orderly, and sometimes frightening land, that a family had come. Not one family, but many families, a whole people descended from a single man named Jacob, who had also been called Israel. They had come to Egypt long before the time of our story, in an age of hunger and hardship, when the land of Canaan had grown dry and the storehouses of Egypt were full. And in Egypt they had stayed. Generation after generation they had stayed, and their families had grown, and the people of Israel had become many. These people were called Hebrews. They were a people set apart, with their own customs and their own memory, of a God who had spoken to their ancestors and made them promises. Promises that stretched forward through time like a road disappearing into the distance. Promises not yet fully seen or understood, but held quietly in the hearts of the people who carried them. For a long time, the Hebrews had lived in Egypt without great trouble. But now something had changed. A new Pharaoh had come to sit on the throne of Egypt. He was powerful, as pharaohs always were. He was accustomed to being obeyed, and he looked out over the land of Egypt, and he saw the Hebrew people, numerous now, spread across the region of Goshen in the northeastern part of Egypt, living in their settlements and tending their lives. And something in him grew uneasy. He did not know the old stories. He did not remember the Hebrew man named Joseph, who long ago had served a former pharaoh faithfully, who had interpreted dreams and managed grain and saved the land of Egypt in a time of famine. That history was gone from his awareness, settled beneath layers of time like sediment beneath the river. What he saw was only this: a people who were not Egyptian, a people who were growing in number, a people who seemed to him somehow beyond his control. And so, quietly at first, the weight of his power began to press down upon the Hebrew people. Let us stay here for a moment in this part of the story and let it settle gently around us. The Hebrews were made into laborers, into servants of the state. They were given the work of building, mixing clay and straw into bricks, carrying those bricks in the heat of the Egyptian sun, shaping and stacking and fitting stone, raising up the store cities of Pithom and Ramesses. These were great construction projects, the kind that required many hands and many hours, and the hands and hours that built them belonged to the people of Israel. If you could close your eyes and imagine it softly, not with distress, but with a kind of quiet witness, you might see the long lines of workers moving through the morning dust. You might hear the slow rhythm of labor, the scraping of clay, the sound of brick against brick. The sun would already be warm by mid-morning, and the light would lie flat and bright across the wide, flat land. It was hard work, the kind of work that fills the body with a deep tiredness by the end of the day, the kind that makes sleep feel like a mercy. And yet, in the midst of all of it, the people of Israel continued. They continued to live and to have children and to pass on their stories and their faith. The pressure that was meant to diminish them did not. There is something quiet and enduring in that. The way a people can carry difficulty without being unmade by it. The way the roots of something can go on growing, even when the surface above is covered and pressed and hard. Pharaoh noticed this. He increased the work. He added more to the burden. He assigned taskmasters, men whose role was to oversee the labor and ensure it never slowed. The days of the Hebrew people were long and the work was relentless. And still, they continued. Eventually, Pharaoh's unease turned to something darker. He spoke to the midwives, the women who helped Hebrew mothers give birth. He gave them an order, a terrible one. An order we will acknowledge quietly here and then move past, because it is the kind of thing that belongs to darkness and fear, and our story tonight is not about those things. Our story is about what persisted through them. The midwives did not obey the order. These women, whose names the old text remembers, Shiphrah and Puah, feared something greater than Pharaoh's command. They went on doing what they had always done, helping mothers, welcoming new life into the world, watching over the precious and ordinary miracle of birth. They could not be bought or bent by fear. They simply continued their work, moving quietly from house to house, arriving in the nighttime hours when they were needed, and doing what they knew to be right. It is enough to know that they did this, that in the middle of a time of pressure and fear, there were women going about their gentle work by lamplight, with steady hands and unshaken hearts. Now our story moves closer. It narrows the way a river sometimes narrows as it approaches something important, the current growing a little stronger, the banks a little closer together. In the land of Goshen, in one of the Hebrew settlements there, a woman lived with her husband and her 2 children. The husband's name was Amram. The woman's name was Jochebed. Their daughter was named Miriam, a young girl, old enough to be observant, old enough to be trusted with quiet responsibilities. Their son was older still, a boy named Aaron. This family belonged to the tribe of Levi, one of the 12 tribes of Israel, a tribe that would, in time, become known for service in the things of God. But that future was still distant. For now, they were simply a family in Goshen, in a difficult time, living their days like all the other families around them. and then a new life began. Jochebed was expecting a child, a third child. In the middle of everything, in the middle of the hard labor and the heavy decrees and the uncertain days, a new child was growing quietly, waiting in the way that all children wait before they enter the world, tucked in the warmth and the dark and the deep interior silence. There is something remarkable about this, about life preparing itself in the midst of difficulty, unhurried, according to its own schedule. The world outside might be tense and troubled, but within, something was being knit together slowly, day by day, in the deep and ordinary way of all growing things. When the child was born, he was a boy. Jochebed looked at him, and something settled in her. The old text says simply that she saw he was a fine child. Goodly, the old translations say. Beautiful. There was something about him that quieted her heart, even as it broke it open with love. She hid him. For 3 months, Jochebed hid her son. Let us think about what this means for a moment. Not with worry, but with a kind of soft, careful attention. She hid a baby for 3 months. That is the work of many quiet hours, of careful listening, of hushing and soothing, of timing and patience. It is the work of a mother whose love is both fierce and still, who has arranged herself completely around the task of protecting this small life. She would have known the rhythms of her neighborhood, which hours were quieter, which times of day the overseers came near, when it was safer to let him cry, and when she needed to hold him close and breathe gently against his face until he settled back to sleep. She would have known the sounds of the road outside her home. She would have listened with the particular sharpened hearing that comes to people who are keeping watch over something precious. 3 months of this. 3 months of love expressed as careful, quiet vigilance. We do not know the details of those 3 months. The text does not give them to us, and perhaps that is right. There are some things about love and endurance that do not need to be explained. They simply are what they are, the faithful, repeated work of care. At some point, and mothers know when these points come, even when they cannot explain how they know. Jochebed understood that hiding him at home was no longer possible. He was growing. His voice was growing with him. The careful silence that had protected them so far could not hold much longer. And so she did something that took the deepest kind of courage, a kind of courage that looks, from the outside, like an ordinary task. She made a basket. She gathered the materials that grew along the banks of the Nile. Papyrus reeds, tall, slender, pale green in the Egyptian sun, growing thickly at the river's edge, the way marsh plants always do, rooted in the soft mud, their tops swaying gently when the wind came off the water. She gathered these reeds and she wove them together carefully, the way baskets were made in that time and that place, the fibers going over and under, building up into something solid and useful and shaped. Then she coated it with tar and with pitch, substances that sealed the gaps between the weaving, made it waterproof, made it buoyant. It was the same process used to prepare small boats along the Nile. She was making a small boat, a very small boat, barely large enough for a baby, but built with the same care as something meant to travel far. She lined it too with something soft. We are not told exactly what, but it is easy to imagine, some cloth perhaps, folded gently to make the inside smooth and warm, a small nest within the woven walls. Then she placed her son inside. The Nile, when you are standing at its bank, is very wide, much wider than rivers in many other parts of the world. Its water is dark and it moves steadily, carrying all the things rivers carry: silt and plant matter, the invisible accumulation of the land upstream, all of it moving slowly, purposefully toward the sea. At the edges of the Nile, where the water slows among the reeds and the papyrus grows tall, there is a different quality of stillness. The tall plants make a kind of enclosure. The water there barely moves. It holds things gently, the way still water does, cradling whatever floats upon it without urgency or force. This is where Jochebed brought the basket. She set it among the reeds at the water's edge. She set it where the river would hold it, where the papyrus would shelter it, where the shadows of the tall plants would lie across it in the morning light. She placed it among the flags, the reeds, and she stepped back. We do not know what she said in those moments. The text does not tell us. We do not know whether she prayed aloud or in the deep, wordless interior way of a heart that has run out of other options. We do not know how long she stood there before she turned and walked away, but she had done what she could do. She had made the best shelter her hands could make. She had placed him in the best place she could find. She had done everything that was within her power to do. And then she walked away and left the rest in hands she could not see. There was someone else at the river that morning, standing some distance away, close enough to see the basket, far enough not to be noticed. Miriam, the older sister, the young girl. We do not know exactly how old she was. Old enough to be given this task, old enough to understand its weight. She stood in the reeds or behind them, watching, quietly, with the patience of a child who has been taught to be still and to wait and to watch. This is a quiet kind of heroism, the kind that does not announce itself. Miriam was not doing anything dramatic. She was simply standing and watching, hour after hour perhaps, keeping her eyes on the small woven shape among the reeds, while the Egyptian morning unfolded around her and the light moved across the water. The Nile would have been busy in the mornings with the routines of Egyptian life. People moving along the banks, carrying things, washing things, calling to one another across the water. The sounds of animals and wheels and voices, all part of the ordinary texture of the day. Miriam would have been still within all of that, just another small presence near the river, unremarkable to anyone who passed. She watched, she waited. Among the people who came to the river that morning was a woman of great station, a daughter of Pharaoh himself. She came to the river to bathe. This was a practice in Egypt, a part of the morning ritual for people of refinement and standing. She came with her attendants, the women who accompanied her wherever she went, whose role was to see to her needs and her comfort. The princess moved through the morning with the particular ease of someone who has always had the world arranged around her. She had grown up in the palace. She'd grown up in luxury and order. She'd grown up among beautiful things and large spaces. The river was part of her world, part of the beauty of the landscape she inhabited. She walked along the bank, her attendants nearby, the morning light on the water, and then she saw it. Among the reeds, not far from the bank, something that was not a plant, Not a piece of driftwood, not the ordinary debris of the river. Something woven, a basket, sealed, and sealed carefully, resting in the still water at the river's edge. She sent her attendant to bring it to her. When the basket was set before her and she opened it, she found the child. He was crying. The sound of a crying baby is one of those sounds that crosses every boundary. It crosses the boundaries of class and rank and language and time. It is one of the most human sounds there is. Small and insistent, and asking for something very simple. For someone to come. For someone to be present. For the loneliness and discomfort to be addressed. The princess heard this sound, and she felt compassion. The old text is simple about this, and that simplicity is right. She looked at the baby, she heard his crying, and something in her opened toward him. She knew immediately that this was a Hebrew child. The circumstances were clear enough. She knew what had been decreed. She understood exactly what it meant that this child was in a basket at the river's edge. And she felt compassion anyway. This is one of the quiet, important moments in the story. A woman in the house of Pharaoh, the very house from which the decree had come, looked at this small, crying child and chose to let her heart respond to what it felt. She did not harden herself. She did not turn away from what she felt toward him. She held him perhaps, or let the attendant hold him, and she looked at him, and she named him already in her heart, or very nearly. And then Miriam stepped forward. She had been watching all of this. She had seen the princess approach. She had seen the basket discovered. She had seen it brought to the water's edge and opened. She had heard the baby cry. She had watched the princess's face, and she had read in it something important. And she stepped forward. She was a child approaching a princess. There was a vast distance between these two, in rank, in power, in every outward measure of the world. But Miriam moved through that distance with a steadiness that is remarkable, even now, even across all the centuries. She offered a suggestion, simply, quietly, as if it were the most ordinary thing. There were Hebrew women nearby who could nurse the child. Would the princess like her to go and find one? The princess said yes. Miriam turned and she ran. She ran back to her mother. There is a pause in the story here. Not a dramatic one, but a real one. The space between Miriam running to her mother and the moment when Jochebed arrived at the river. We do not know how long that took. We do not know what Jochebed felt when Miriam came to her, what her face did, what her hands did. We can only imagine, and we can imagine it gently. A mother who had placed her child in the river, who had walked away, who had left the rest in hands she could not see, being told to come back, being told to come back right now. When Jochebed arrived, the princess spoke to her. She asked her to take this child and nurse him, and promised to pay her wages. We pause here again, very gently, to receive the quietness of this. Jochebed was being asked to nurse and care for her own child. She was being paid to do it. She was being given by the daughter of the man who had ordered what she most feared, the exact thing she had tried so desperately to protect. Time with her son, closeness with her son, the continuation of his life in her arms. She could not have arranged this. She had not planned it. She had made a basket and set it on the river and walked away. And the river and the morning and the compassion of a stranger had arranged the rest. She took him in her arms. We can stop here for a moment and let the weight of that settle into quietness. She took him in her arms. We do not know how long this arrangement lasted. It was likely the years of early childhood, the years during which children need nursing and close care, the years during which so much of what a person becomes is laid down quietly, like the first layers of a foundation. Perhaps 2 or 3 years, perhaps a little more. During these years, the child lived with his family. He was in his mother's arms. He was in his home, in the warmth and the ordinary rhythms of a Hebrew household in Goshen. The smells of cooking, the sound of his father's voice, the presence of Miriam and Aaron, the language of his people, the stories of his people, the quiet undercurrent of faith that ran through everything. What did Jochebed tell him during those years? We do not know. The text does not say. But it is not hard to imagine a mother whispering things to a child in the night. Things he was too small to understand fully, but that settled into him anyway, the way the earliest things always do, settling into the part of a person that is deeper than memory. She would have sung to him. Every culture in every time has sung to its children. She would have held him in the Egyptian night and sung softly, and the words of her songs would have been in her own language, the language of the Hebrews, and they would have carried within them something of everything she knew and believed and hoped for. She knew the stories. She knew about Abraham, who had been called to leave everything familiar and go toward a promise he could only partially see. She knew about Isaac and Jacob, about the long thread of faithfulness running through her people's history, about a God who remembered. She would have passed these things to her son in the only way she could, gently, quietly, through the small and daily intimacies of caring for a child. And then the time came when he had to go. When the child was old enough, Jochebed brought him to the daughter of Pharaoh, as they had arranged. He became her son. She gave him a name, Moses. The name carries in it the resonance of the moment of his finding, the word for drawing out, for lifting from the water. He was the child drawn from the river. He was the child the river had given back. Moses. He went to live in the palace of Pharaoh. He would grow up among great wealth and great power, trained in the ways of Egyptian learning, surrounded by the architecture and the artistry and the complex systems of a great civilization. He would learn the language and the customs and the knowledge of Egypt. All of this would be part of who he became. And within him, carried from those early years that cannot be taken away, would be something else, something quieter, something laid down in lamplight and whispered in the dark. The knowledge of where he had come from, the knowledge of who his people were, the beginnings of an identity that no palace would fully erase. The river had given him back, and the years had begun. There is a word sometimes used for what we have been watching move through this story. It is an old word, a theological word, but we will use it softly tonight without making arguments or explanations. The word is providence. Providence is the way in which care moves through circumstances without announcing itself. The way a thing works out without anyone fully orchestrating it. The way kindness appears in unexpected places. The way a basket stays afloat. The way a princess looks at a crying child and feels something she did not expect to feel. The way a young girl's suggestion is exactly the right suggestion at exactly the right moment. No one in the story made a grand plan. Jochebed made a basket, because a basket was what she could make. Miriam stood in the reeds, because standing and watching was what she could do. Shiphrah and Puah continued their work, because their work was what they had. The princess came to bathe, as she did every morning, as part of her ordinary routine. And all of these ordinary, careful, humble things joined together to become something larger, something that could not have been predicted or arranged by any single one of them. This is how it often works, not with great fanfare or clear explanation, quietly, one thing at a time. A basket among the reeds, a child who cries, a woman who feels compassion, a sister who steps forward. Each small thing faithful, each small thing offered, and the outcome belonging to something beyond any one pair of hands. We have come a long way tonight, across a great distance of time and geography, through the warmth of Egypt and the cool shadow of the Nile's reeds, through a mother's sleepless nights and a young girl's patient watching, through compassion offered across the distance of rank and power, through the quiet miracle of an ordinary morning. The story does not end here, of course. Moses will grow up. He will have a long life ahead of him, full of wilderness and burning bushes, and long desert roads and conversations with God, and the slow, painful, patient work of leading a people toward freedom. All of that lies ahead in the years and the decades after this morning at the river. But tonight we are here, at the beginning. We are here in the quiet before all of that. We are here in the morning light at the edge of the Nile, with the reeds standing tall and the water still, and the small basket resting where the mother placed it. We are here in the moment before the princess arrived, when all was quiet and nothing was yet resolved, and the world did not yet know what it was holding. There is a peacefulness in that, strangely enough, in the moment before the resolution, before the answer, before the story knows how it will turn out. There is a kind of restfulness in sitting in that space and trusting that something is being held. The basket was held by the water. The water was held by the Nile. The child was held by all of it. The basket and the water and the reeds and the mourning and the compassion of a stranger and the faithfulness of a sister and the deep, unshakable love of a mother who had done everything she could do and then entrusted the rest to hands she could not see. And the child was held. Let that be the last image we carry with us into sleep tonight. The child held, the basket resting in the still water at the river's edge, the reeds surrounding it gently, the morning light moving slowly, as it always does, across the wide surface of the Nile. The sound of water, steady and soft and unhurried, the way it has always sounded along every river in every time. The world is old, and the river is slow, and the reeds are still. And somewhere in the stillness, something small and precious is being held by the water, and the water is being held by the earth, and the earth is being held by something that holds all things. Rest now. Let the breath grow slow. Let the mind grow quiet, the way the water grows quiet at the river's edge, where the current slows and the reeds grow tall, and everything becomes a little more still. You are held tonight, as the child was held, by something patient and present and beyond full understanding. Something that does not sleep and does not forget and is not troubled by the things that trouble us. The story is here. The night is here. The quiet is here. Let sleep come now, gently, the way the water holds a small basket, without force, without urgency, without anything asked of you in return. Simply rest, simply be still. The morning will come in its own time, as mornings always do, and you will wake when it does, held still, as you have been all the night long. Rest well. The night is quiet. The river is slow. All is held. All is well. Amen.